What's your creepiest, glitch in the matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? Taking the trash out at night, super remote area, so I know for a fact we're the only ones around here, getting close to the road and I hear very clearly, "Help me," from a female voice. Even knowing there's such a slim chance of there being another living person around. I still feel like I should look around and check it out in case I wasn't just hearing things and someone actually needs help. Take about 2 steps in the direction I thought I heard it. Hear a giggle in the same exact voice, turn around and walk promptly back up the driveway because frick that shit. Anyone who actually needed help wouldn't be laughing, I don't think. When I was a child, my sister and I were walking home from the park and a man called, "Help." We found an open manhole and could hear the man calling for help, but we could not see him. I was 9 and panicking thought we should crawl in to help. My sister, 11, had the good instinct to get our parents. When we came back with them, the man was gone. As an adult, I can see the whole thing was a ploy, the manhole right next to the park. It makes complete sense but is still so creepy. You almost got fricking Pennywise. I was working on my motorcycle in a dirt lot where I had crashed it trying to do a sick drift, breaking off the clutch lever and the gear shifter. I had brought a wrench set with me and I was using one of them to take off a bolt when I put it down on the ground to finish unscrewing the bolt with my hand. 2 minutes later I went to pick it back up and it was gone. I ran all around this dirt lot looking for it to no avail. Luckily I had a spare in the car. Fixed the bike and drove back to my apartment to shower as I was filthy. I walked into my room and sitting on my desk was the wrench. I was dumbfounded. I once clocked out of work at 6 p.m., like I always did at the time, and began my hour-long train ride home. After I had found a seat, I went to sleep and woke up just before my station. From the station, it is a short bus journey, 10 to 15 minutes, to reach home. During the entire journey, I didn't use my phone and I don't wear a watch, so I didn't really notice the time anywhere. When I reached home, my family surprised me with, "You're home early, everything all right?" I look at the wall clock and it is about to be 6 p.m. I was too shocked to understand what happened. Checked other watches, cell phones, etc., and the time is absolutely right. A few days later, the admin emailed us the timesheets for the month, times clocking in and out, and every single days for me was around the same 6 p.m. So it certainly wasn't me having left work earlier. To this date, I haven't figured out how I gained between 60 to 90 minutes that day. 1985. My ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a streetlight, so the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed asleep. I dreamt that I woke up, reached down to pet him, and he turned into a glossy black bivalve oyster thing which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows towards the wall. I asked, "What's wrong?" She said, "What is that shiny black clam thing with the teeth at the end of the bed? Where's the dog?" We had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me a chill. I've told this story before and could go into a ton of detail, but here's the short version. I am 100% sure I vividly remember a dog that apparently doesn't exist. When I was 16 we lived on the other side of the province and my uncle had this little Jack Russell named Crew. Crew went missing for several months and then turned up at a humane society over an hour away, and we were all shocked this little dog has made it so far. Anyway, that was almost 20 years ago, and the other day I was talking to my parents and was like, whenever I hear about Jack Russells I think about Crew and that stunt he pulled. And they had no idea what I was talking about. Insisted my uncle had never had such a dog, I must have dreamed it, etc. Honestly, anyone else who would have remembered this dog has been dead for a long time, and I don't even have any pictures of my uncle. I have absolutely no way to prove this dog existed, but I'm sure that he did. I was driving about 50 miles per hour, and a car ran a stop sign on an on-ramp and pulled out right in front of me. I remember bracing for impact, and then I was about 300 yards down the highway and I saw the car at the ramp in my rear view, just about to pull out. I was walking my dog and I was almost to the driveway when I looked down for some reason, and I looked back up and I ended up being back at the road about 6 blocks away from where I thought I was. I was so confused, but my dog looked completely fine. I don't drink or do drugs, I'm still pretty young. I had just pulled into the parking lot of where I worked and was walking towards the building. It was like 3 in the afternoon, broad daylight. All of a sudden, I heard an ambulance's siren start sounding. Naturally, I looked down the road to try and see the ambulance. I see it approaching and decided to watch it for a bit. It was quickly getting closer, and it was about to pass right by me. However, There was a large SUV waiting to turn out of the parking lot and onto the road, blocking a few meters of the road from my view. The ambulance passed behind the SUV, probably about 50 feet away from me at most, and I vividly remember the siren becoming completely silent in that instant. The ambulance had vanished entirely as it passed behind that SUV. I was so confused. The road did not have many cars on it at the time, and it was broad daylight. I did a triple take and made sure that I didn't just miss it. I had a clear view of the road going both directions, and there was no more ambulance to be seen. No more siren either. I walked up and down the road, trying to find it for a solid minute. But nope, it was gone. I was well rested, not on drugs, and I didn't have a history of hallucinations. It seems dismissible, but I was completely aware of what happened, and I can't explain it to this day. My friend Sarah was in a nightclub, drunk off her face, when she got an overwhelming urge to tell a total stranger that her leg hurts. Edit, it didn't. All a bit strange, she ignores it but it doesn't stop, so she walks up to this guy and says, "I know this is crazy but I've got a huge urge to tell you my leg hurts." "I know that's crazy," again. "Sorry." But he bursts into tears. Turns out his dad had just died and they made a pact before that if there was an afterlife he would get a message to him saying a totally random phrase, so there could be no mistakes. Which they decided was "I've hurt my leg." I love this story. It reminded me of a glitch when I was at a perfect level of fricked up. I was partying at someone's rooftop hair band after the bar and I had the perfect buzz going on. I met a guy, who looked oddly familiar, but I couldn't place him. I introduced myself and told him he looked familiar and he said he didn't recognize me. He was here on business and lived 5,000 km away. A picture of a small girl and a baby came into my head, almost like a memory. I said, "You have a daughter around 5, right? And a newborn?" And then I blurted out, "Well, your grandpa is your newborn reincarnated." He responded with, "What?" "I do have a 5-year-old and my grandpa just passed away and we are planning on naming our baby after him. The baby is expected to be born any day now." He was shocked. I was shocked too. Where did that come from? I felt as though I knew his entire life. His relationships with his wife, his parents. How he felt about his job. Things only close family friends would know. He avoided me after that. I don't blame him. Apparently, I have psychic powers when I get the perfect level of fricked up. I have yet to experience anything like that again. My wife passed away a year ago today. Had some odd things happen, like a couple of old meaningful pictures show up that I swore were in storage. The strangest one was I vacuumed the carpet and as soon as I was done a diamond ring was on the ground right where I had just cleaned. It was like she was saying, "Hey, this one is real, don't lose it." I remember driving my car to this intersection in this rural area and I'm checking both sides because of terrible blind spots. In the corner of my eye, my mother is sitting there and says something like "It's all clear my way." I look back and she isn't there. My mother had been dead for a few years at this point. This was also in the middle of the day and I've never had it happen since. I have a good one. I was about 12 years old, and woke up in the middle of the night needing to take a leak. I walked across the hall to the little bathroom, hit the lights, and was about to reach for the toilet when I glanced up and saw a face in the mirror. It was not my face. It was as if someone was on the other side, standing to the right, with their face right next to the glass, staring at me. I only saw it for the briefest moment, but it is seared into my brain. I screamed, and ran out of there to find my dad. Of course, my dad investigated, then calmed me down, or tried to. Eventually, we had a prayer session, because I was so freaked out. Eventually, I must have gone back to sleep. Fast forward to my 30s. I'd forgotten all about the event. One night while visiting, my dad quietly brings it up. "Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror?" It suddenly came back to me in a rush of memory, sending a chill down my spine. "Yay, I remember. Well," he said, "I sometimes think about that night." He looked down at the floor, with a serious expression. I saw it too. He went on to describe exactly what I'd seen. We have no idea what that was. Apparently, when he investigated, he saw it and had a freak out of his own. Apparently, the prayer session was as much for his own nerves as mine. I respect him for keeping that tidbit from me till my 30s, but I kinda wish he'd never told me. Around 12 years old I was watching Mega's XLR, or something that was on at the time. Sitting there I noticed that the sun just turned off. Like completely. I was really confused, opened the blinds and it was dark. Show was still at the same spot, but the clock on the cable box said it was 5 hours later. My best guess for what happened was that I passed out without realizing it, like those nights where you lay in bed and blink and suddenly it's morning. So I'm guessing I fell asleep sitting up, for exactly enough time to have Cartoon Network play a rerun of the show get to the exact spot I fell asleep at. Was surreal though. In college, I took a hard news soft news journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent, but if all of your grandparents were still alive we had to choose one. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially once all of my grandparents were still alive. Scramming for an easy grandparent to write about, I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late, 10:30 p.m. my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake and be able to answer that question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital, where he was declared dead. In the time my mom and I had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His death was entirely unexpected at that. Although he was in his 80s, he was the healthiest of my grandparents at the time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that writing assignment as his actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. I've told this on Reddit before but here it is. I had a very important document that I only ever kept in one place. I kept it in the top drawer of a small filing cabinet. I never moved it and would always see it in the drawer whenever I opened it for whatever reason. The day came that I needed it now and I didn't sweat it because I knew exactly where it was. Well, I'd be damned if it wasn't there. Cue panic attack. I tore that filing cabinet up. I removed everything and spread it out, flipped papers over, dug through envelopes, shook everything out. Shined a flashlight all through the emptied cabinet in case it was somehow stuck to the sides. I mean, it was not there. I can assure you no one took it or was messing with me. I was so frustrated. I even looked through other parts of my house. But I knew it wouldn't be in any of those places and it wasn't. I was intermittently going back to the dump filing cabinet. No luck. Super irritated, I searched the rest of the house again and, on my way back downstairs where my filing cabinet was, I called out in frustration, "Okay. Bring it back." I don't know who I thought I was talking to because I was alone. But you guessed it. I found it in the top drawer of my filing cabinet where it should have been in the first place. I was relieved and totally freaked out. It's an odd thing where people close to me talk about things I was previously thinking of before I see them. So this has always bothered me. I was 13 years old at the time and my dad was a coal miner. He worked third shift, known as the hood owl shift, which was midnight to noon. As such he got home around 2 p.m. and slept till around 9, got up at dinner with us, and left for work. My dad was always pretty gruff and constantly yelled at us if my younger brother or I made too much noise and woke him up after getting home from somewhere, which as an adult now I completely understand. So one day I did something to wake him up, I forget what. Anyways, he calls me back to the bedroom and I'm expecting to get a dressing down, but he just looked at me and said, "It's okay. Come over here and give me a hug." What 13-year-old boy wants to hug their dad? I kinda squirmed a bit and he followed up with, "What if something happened to me?" And just laid there all grizzled and tired. I didn't hug him. That night there was an accident in the mine. He saved everyone on his crew, including the one person he went back in for. His was the only death, and I'm convinced he knew it was gonna happen. I'll never forget his eyes that day. If someone asked you for a hug, give it to them. I love you, Dad. Around 12 years ago I had a dark purple 3 Series BMW which I drove to work and parked in the same spot for around 3 years. I sold the car due to mileage and wanting something a little more reliable and purchased a different car. 1 week later, I turn up to work to find my purple BMW parked in my parking spot. I was totally WTF? Turns out that we had a work experience kid start that day, and his dad had dropped him off in my old car that he bought 2 days earlier. What are the chances of that? I've never met this kid or his dad, and yet here was my old car in my space. I always have weird visions, or I'll see something in a dream, but I won't notice that I've seen it, then like a week or so after I'll see the exact same thing. Almost like deja vu, but not quite, since it hasn't actually happened before. It would always be something so specific, and it has happened multiple times, so it can't just be a strange coincidence. Edit. It's very reassuring to see all the stories of people experiencing the same thing, assures me that I'm not going insane, or maybe many others are just going insane with me.